want to say a big thank you and welcome to Matt White this morning. He's going to be talking to us about being cyber fit for your business, which is very, very important and something that every one of us should be aware of. So over to you, Matt. Any questions from anyone, please let us know. All right.
I won't share my screen just yet. I'll share my screen in a minute. Actually, no, I'll tell you what, I'll share my screen now so that we can, it is that one, I believe. You should be able to see my screen now. Cool. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about cyber. It's not the most exciting topic in the world unless you're watching it on, some Hollywood film, in which case it's really exciting. And believe it or not, there are some things like that, but most of the time it's not. But before I do, I'll give you a quick, because some of you know me, some of you don't. I'll give you a quick bit about me. I am Matt White. I am a cybersecurity strategist. I'm also an author. I'm writing a book with someone called, if you know the game, The Art of Pickup. Neil Strauss, a New York best-selling author. He's mentoring me to write a book. I've been in and around cyber since cyber was created. Cyber's only really been around for about 10 years, but I've been in and around when it was IT before that. I was originally a web developer back in the dot-com boom, writing applications for people like Pfizer, NR International, Forestry Research Program, sorry. And back in those days, it was a case of if you wrote the code, they expected you to know what the hardware was. So you'd spec the hardware. If you expect the hardware, they expected you to be able to make it resilient. And then before you knew it, you were classed as a solutions architect. This day and age, that means something completely different. But 20 years ago, it was a very different thing. So I moved out of the techie role into one of consultancy because I'm more of a people person and I have an opinion on everything and like to talk. I ended up in Big Four. So I'm ex-KPMG, ex-Deloitte. I spent up until July last year, I spent 3 years in the previous 3 years at Chanel. I was the global head of InfoSec strategy for Chanel, which my wife wasn't that happy when I left because it meant that she had to lose the free handbags and all of the other stuff. I'm now the CEO of ZAS Limited. For those people who can't pronounce the company, it's the X is like a Z for xylophone or Xerox or something like that. I was on the call with someone this morning who was saying, how do you pronounce your company name? It's like it's a Z. I should really rebrand it so that it is a Z, I suppose. And we're all about improving cyber health. Now, I say health and not it's about cybersecurity and about transformation, because cyber isn't just one thing. My view on this is I used to be really fat, 41-inch waist fat. I was short and fat, so I was like a barrel. And I went through a lot of stuff when I eventually decided I wanted to lose the weight. And really, the key thing is it's not just about exercise. So the way that people tend to take cybersecurity is you have to do this set of things and that's just do the exercises and you get jacked. But the reality is it's not the case. If you do that, you'll go on a crash diet. Let's say Atkins, go back 10 years, Atkins was the thing. You go on Atkins and you lose a load of weight. You stop the fad diet, you put the weight back on, or at least some of the weight back on. Some people actually get worse than they were before. That kind of approach for cyber means that you go in, you do some quick changes for a very short period of time. You're compliant and you feel like you're secure, but the reality is you're not. And it just like with health. So we talk about cyber health because just like with health, it's actually about having small sustainable changes. Nowadays, they don't say you must go to gym 5 times a week, 5 times a day. Well, I know people that do that, but 5 times a week. It's you need to do your 10,000 steps. You need to eat your 5 a day, cut down on your smoking, cut down on your drinking, and just generally live a healthy lifestyle. It's exactly the same for cyber. So that's the approach that we're going to talk through today. A couple of other things about me that are a bit quirky and interesting. So I'm actually part of the British power climbing circuit. During lockdown, I damaged a nerve in my leg, and it means that now I'm a power climber. I was in Sunday last week, or the week just gone, I was in Edinburgh and I got silver in the power climbing championships. And you might think from the start of it, thank you, little plug for me there. Anybody wants to sponsor me, please feel free. I'm trying out for Team GB later on in the year. But you might think what that has to do with cyber, but the reason I put it here is power climbing is all about adaptivity. And it's about the fact that there is a particular route, a particular beta for climbing up the wall that's in the person's mind when they set it. But as soon as you add power in, it means that you're not actually able to do it in the same way as somebody else. But you go to all of these competitions and people are still amazing climbing. In the World Championships a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy who rocked up to the wall in a wheelchair and then topped out, so all the way up the wall, so 40-ish moves up, like 15 meters up, using just his arms. And he literally just powered his way up to the top. And he did it faster than you would do if you were climbing it normally. But adaptability is the key to really have a good approach for cyber. It's not one size fits all. What your company does is really, that depends what you need. You know, if you're a huge multinational that works in 50 different countries and has 150,000 people like Shell, for instance, oil and gas, you need something very different than if you're a small 1 or 2 person company that uses Office 365, a laptop and a mobile phone. But the general principles of what needs to be done is the same. It's that, was it Ralph Waldo Emerson said, methods are many, principles are few, methods may change and principles never do. It's that thing. If you get the fundamentals right, which is about behavior, it's not about tech, it's about behavior, then you can actually get an awful lot of stuff done without spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's still not exciting, but it's something that's actually probably worth having a conversation about. So I'll go for a little bit about what the problem is. What is the problem with cyber? Why is it so difficult? Because if you're a 1-person, outfit, or even a 10-person outfit, it doesn't sound that complicated. Make sure that people have access to the only things they need. Make sure that everything's secure. It sounds quite easy, but the reality is, if you understand the history of how things happened, then so I'll do this, then I'll actually break and I'll do a little demo to actually show something in a minute. So go back to the 70s, which is when that's when IT really started. It was back in the 70s. IT was ruled by men with beards, wearing cardigans, living in a fridge. You had one main huge computer that took up the entire basement of an organization, and everybody had a dumb terminal. So literally they just had a keyboard and a screen. The person who ran that literally felt they were God, and they controlled everything. They only had one application, probably, maybe 2 or 3 if you were a big company, but you really had one thing. You had maybe millions of users around the entire planet. And I think that's probably pushing it a bit. It was probably only hundreds of thousands. Bearing in mind, there's billions of people in the world. Fast forward to the 90s. Now you've got PCs. You've got hundreds of millions of applications because suddenly everyone has one of these at home. Everyone has it at the office. You've got tens of thousands of applications, but it's still controlled by one person. The network administrator, the IT guy in the office, still controls everything. And really, you protect it by putting antivirus on, because that's about as far as it went. Laptops started to be a thing, but they were still expensive. They were quite clunky and big, and therefore most people didn't have a laptop at home. If you were a corporate office, you'd have a laptop, maybe, but it was all controlled by a central administration team. So that's still quite easy to control. Now, fast forward to today, you have mobile, cloud, everyone's got a device. You can connect to your fridge. I mean, there was a really famous case of a casino a few years ago, and the casino was hacked because their online fish tank had been breached. So they basically had a webcam that demonstrated, that literally just showed the fish tank to the world in the middle of the casino, and someone had hacked and compromised it. And they used that for their launch pad for a cyber attack. So now you can literally connect anything. Everyone has pretty much has some form of connection to the world. So there were billions of users. Most people have more than one device. I mean, at home, my daughters have an iPad each. I have an iPad, a laptop, a phone, a watch. My wife has a watch, an iPad. a laptop, a phone. So suddenly the number of devices for any one person is much higher. And there are millions, if not billions of apps. You can pretty much get an app to do anything, whether that's for your iPhone, whether that's for your laptop. So suddenly it's this really difficult thing to control because there is no control. It's the Wild West. You could literally, and then you've got add in things like bring your own device. So you don't have corporate IT kit anymore. You could literally rock up to work and then dial into Office 365 and access email on your mobile phone. That's a way to get data in and out of a company. And the company doesn't have any control over that now. So suddenly it's a really difficult thing to do. Now, I'm going to break the screen sharing a second to do a little demo because that doesn't really, people don't really understand just at the thought of that, why it's so difficult. So I'm going to a little quick demo. So for the sake of today, this balloon is your office, is your entire IT infrastructure. So let's say that that's what it's like in the 70s. It's really easy. I can protect that. I can put it under my, I can put it under my jacket. It's really easy. And let's say that this pin, if you can see that, is an attacker. I can block that. You're not going to be able to do it. It's really easy. Fast forward to it being big. So we say the PC industry, 90s, say mid-90s. It's a bit bigger, but I can still protect it. I can still block it from an attacker. It's manageable. Now, so even my hand covers most of the attack surface that I'm presenting to the world. So it's quite safe. Now, let's say that that is today's, that's the average thing today, right? It doesn't matter what I do, I am not going to be able to protect all of that, all of the face that's presented to the world. And this pin is still an attacker. So it doesn't matter. It's really easy. I can track my hand if I can guess where the pin's coming from, and I can stop that attack. But what if I don't know where the attack's coming from? Because there's not just one pin, there's not just one attacker. There are hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions, from everyone from a little script kiddie who's decided he wants to try hacking because he's seen it on TV and it's cool, to a nation state, to cyber criminals that are nation state sponsored cyber criminals. So it's really easy to see that this pin could get through. And with one mistake, one small prick can take down a network. And it is that simple. So you have to have some pity for the people that are trying to secure this stuff, right? Because it's not an easy task. I say that because I used to be the person that was trying to secure this. But just like IT, I'm going to share the screen again. Just like IT, cybersecurity expected you to, is that shared? No, there you go. Is expected to have all of the answers. Oh, there you go, just done the demo. A bit about the scale of the problem, and I'm not going to go into this because this is the scary slide that everyone's like, oh, the world's going to $6 trillion globally was expected to be the cost of damages in 2021. Now, the official figures haven't come out yet, but to put it in perspective, as I could never really understand the difference in my head between a million, a billion, and a trillion, because it is a bit weird. So if you just go the difference between a million and a billion, and then the trillion will really take shape. Someone explained it to me that there are 1 million seconds is about, I think it's about 20 days. 1 billion seconds ago, there were still dinosaurs on the planet. That's the scope in numbers, right? And so this is trillion. So that trillion actually breaks down to about $16.1 billion a day was the cost. Now, the reality is that's cost that none of us are really going to expect or really experience, unless you are someone who accidentally or is unfortunate enough to have credit card fraud or something like that, which many of us have experienced over the years. You don't really experience things in that number. If you're Target or Sony or Marriott or BA, then yes, those huge ones, they have millions, hundreds of millions of pounds worth of cost. But it's all of the little companies that get stung from identity theft because their corporate card's gone, or things like that. Someone I know very recently had their life savings taken, about 100 grand taken out of via their corporate account, because it was all linked. Their personal account was the same as their corporate accounts, and they'd stored all of their stuff on their computer. Someone got in via a classic phishing link and took it. Now the money is insured. It's not, they're not going to get it back. They will get it back eventually, but that's going to take months and months and months. So it does impact people. 4 in 10 businesses report of having cyber breaches. Those are the ones that know about it and that actually report it. It's probably more than that. Most people don't necessarily know what it means to have a breach. And then 91% of organizations are planning to increase their security budget. I think we all do to a point. But part of the problem is people think the cyber is expensive. But I'm here today to tell you it doesn't have to be expensive. And we'll go on to that in a minute. The next part of the problem is that there is information from every source. You go on LinkedIn and you get everything from the NCSC, so the National Cybersecurity Centre, through to everyone's mate and every consultancy company selling everything and all of this stuff. And they're all trying to sell a solution. That's what they're all trying to do, really. They're trying to sell their wares. Don't get me wrong. I have a cybersecurity company, so I do try and sell my wares, but that's not what today's about. You don't have to spend loads of money to do this stuff. Have to stress that. It's not a millions and millions of pound thing to get this to do, unless you're a big global company of 150,000 users, because then the sheer number of users makes it that complex. But the biggest problem is that everybody is, everyone has a piece of advice. It's a bit like Dr. Google now. If you have something wrong with you, everybody has a piece of advice, whether it's an old wives' tale or whether it's something they've looked up on Google or the latest article they've read on Facebook. If you've got a health problem, it's exactly the same with IT, which is why when I go to a cocktail party or to a dinner party, I don't say I'm in cybersecurity. I say I'm an author, because then it's a much shorter conversation, especially when I tell them that I'm being mentored by Neil Strauss, because they asked me for some pickup advice. So it's much better. This is a bit about ZAS and improving your health, but I'm not going to go on to that. I'm now going to talk about some of the things that we can do. If I can work out how to stop the screen sharing. How does it stop the screen sharing? See, oh, there you go. Right. So I'll talk a bit about the kind of approaches. These slides, I'll get Gary and Lolly to send them out later on. But let's talk about approach, because I think if you understand the approach, you can understand how you can do things at a much, much cheaper cost for cybersecurity. So back in the traditional thing that everybody expects is cyber's expensive because I'm going to have to buy stuff. I'm going to have to put in new technology. I'm going to have to put in new systems and new everything else. And that is expensive. If you want to put there's something called identity and access management, which is managing the users that have access to your systems. If you've got 2 or 3 users, it's easy. If you've got 2 or 3 applications, it's easy. If you look at a big global organization, they might have 10, 20,000 users and 1,000 different applications across the globe. That becomes a complicated program. In order to do that properly, yes, you have to put in an expensive piece of software called an access governance platform, and it governs who has access to what. It automates it. But for smaller companies, you don't really have to do that. If you go back to the basics of how you do things, it's much, much, much easier. And I'm going to draw on an example. I'm a child from the 70s, and we learned the Green Cross Code. When we were learning to cross the road, you were given 4 things, although you only ever listened to 3 of them, which was stop, look, listen. And then the 4th one was live. Now, I'm not being funny. If you stop, look and listen, the idea is that you live anyway. So you don't really need the 4th thing. And so rule of 3, stop before you get to the road. So stop right before the curb, look both ways, listen to see if there's any other cars, and then go if it's safe. And kids all over the country, and funnily enough, most kids ended up not being run over because it's really simple advice. If you took the current approach to cybersecurity and you tried to do that, you'd end up having every kid being given a piece of tech that told them when it was safe to cross the road, and they'd only cross the road when it's safe. Now, we put some controls in place, like the little green flashing man. When, you know, at a Pelican crossing, you push the button, the green man flashes up when you cross. But even that, you're not taught the second the green man comes, you just walk. You're taught when the second the green man, check to make sure. It's a lot more likely that it's going to be safe because cars should stop. But you don't just walk out into the road. You still stop. So you still stop and you still check. And it's that approach, that's a user-centric approach. That's the user is the person. You as the individual has the responsibility to make sure that you're safe, right? Cybersecurity traditionally doesn't do that. But really, that's the way to approach it if you want to do it at a lower cost, because it doesn't cost a lot of money to help a person understand what their responsibility is, what they need to do to be safe. That's not expensive. It's really not. And even big companies, that's not expensive. I mean, it does get more, the more people, the more complex again because of numbers, but it's not expensive to do it. And that approach is, my view, what it is. So what does that mean when it comes to cybersecurity? It means there's a few really basic things that you can do. Make sure that you have complex passwords. Complex password is one that isn't easy to guess. It doesn't mean that you have to have 50 different types of characters and numbers and uppercase and lowercase. It means that one that's not easy to guess. Now, to do that, you could have 3 different words that don't have any relevance other than maybe to you next to each other with no spaces, or with spaces, it doesn't matter. And that's a really long password. Because the length of the password, the difficulty to crack it increases exponentially the longer it is. So adding special characters does help, but it doesn't help that much, because you could just do a dictionary attack where you literally throw all of the words from the dictionary and then add like a special character at the end, because most people tend to stick, I do as well, stick the special character at the end. That doesn't really make it that much more secure. But a longer password is that much harder. Putting lots of words next to each other, you can imagine that the multiple words infinitely increases the complexity of how hard it is to crack it. That makes it harder for you to remember the password, obviously. But you do it by picking different words that you remember. You do it by using free, there's plenty of free password managers out there. If you're Apple, use the key, let Apple pick a password and then use the keychain to manage it. 1Password, lots of these things are out there that are free, and they will enable things for you. When you, little things, when you're sharing information, I'm currently debating whether or not to try and create like a green cross code for cyber to try and push it out as an awareness thing. And no, think, beware, share is what we're currently thinking about. So think about what you're doing. Think before you click the link. Think before, do I need to send this information if you're sending it? Beware. Beware. And it doesn't matter whether it's social media or whether it's an email, that once it leaves your computer, you've got no control over what happens to it. If it's that sensitive, how do you know it's not going to go to someone? And, with social media, if you're sending some kind of naked picture to your girlfriend or boyfriend, how do you know it's not going to go, they're not going to send it on? Even if you have that view now that they're safe and they're trusted, what happens if you break up with them, which is a whole revenge porn thing? That's why that's such a big deal. But people aren't aware that, if I send that, it's there forever. And once it leaves your phone, your domain, you've got no control over it. So just think about it, beware of what's going to happen to it, and then share it if you still think it's right. Doesn't mean you shouldn't share stuff. Just means that have a bit of thought about it before you push it out. And if you apply those kinds of approaches, cyber's not difficult and it's not expensive. There's plenty of free tools that are out there. There's plenty of free of components built into things like Office 365 and Google that will help. But it's really about, different analogy, because I like analogies. When you learn to drive a car, there's 2 parts to you learning to drive before you're licensed. One is controlling the car. That's like teaching someone how to use a computer. But that's not the whole of it. When you learn, you don't get a license just because you can use Excel and you can send an email. You get your driver's license when you know the rules of the road, you know what your responsibilities are to keep you and everybody else on the road safe, and you demonstrate you can do it. And that's why you get your driver's license. In cyber terms, that's you understanding how to use your computer, but then what you can do to make it safer for you, your company, your family, and everybody else. And that's just basic common sense. It doesn't sound like it, but it really is.